Act 3 starts out uncharacteristically peacefully, with us staring up at the night sky and vowing to be the hero that saves Baldur's Gate. Time would only tell how wrong this vow would turn out to be. Before we can get any proper sleep, we're ambushed by a group of Githwanki. You know what? No, I'm leaving that in. That's what they're called now. We hear our guardian's voice beckoning us to a nearby portal into the astral prism, and we heed the call. Heading inside, we blast a few Githwankers off the map before coming face to face with the truth behind our dream visitor. That truth, of course, being that he's hot as fuck. That he's a mind flayer. He asks for our help in removing the rest of the Gith from the astral prism, and we're not too sure if we trust him yet. What we are sure of, though, is that we just got access to the telekinesis spell and we're super eager to try it out. So we spend the next 4 rounds of combat yeeting Gith off into the vast expanses of space, and we learn that the camera angles in this game really don't like when you do that. Our Dream Guardian introduces himself to us properly as the Emperor and thanks us for our aid in battle. He also offers to trigger the next stage of our Illithid evolution by having us consume an astral tadpole. Before he can finish yapping, we just eat the fucking thing, and while it does perplex him, it also grants us access to the final stage of Illithid abilities. Things like flight, transforming into a displacer beast, and the Mind Blast ability that all of the Illithids in the game can use. But perhaps most importantly, it gives us access to some questionable face tattoos. We finally arrive in Baldur's Gate, and, eager to test out our new Illithid powers, we hunt down the first conflict we can find, which happens to be a civil property dispute. I know it's just a video game and it's not meant to be taken too seriously, but I feel like many real-life legal proceedings could be sped up significantly by employing the method I used here. Have a disinterested third party review the facts of the case for about 15 seconds before they arbitrarily decide which side is right and which side is to face summary execution. After ingratiating ourselves with the locals, we notice that there's a circus in town, which sounds fun. It's not like there's any apocalyptic threats looming over our head at the moment, so we can spare an afternoon for this. When we arrive at the gate, the doorman and his pet ghoul decide they don't like the look of us, I can't imagine why, and deny us entry. A minor setback in the grand scheme of things, as a few smooth words sprinkled here and there is all it takes to change their mind. Once they finally let us in, we do everything in our power to make sure they immediately regret doing so. We start things off by stealing a ring from a genie and then blatantly cheating at his carnival game before gloating about the entire endeavor to his face. The circus staff don't seem to care too much, although we do piss off the genie, who, as punishment, sends us to Discount Jurassic Park. Determined to cause a nuisance, we return from the jungles of Chult and pick up right where we left off. Since theft clearly wasn't enough of a crime to cause a stir with the nearby guards, we escalate straight to murder. Full disclosure, there is more reason than just bloodlust for us killing this NPC. She has on her an item called the Spellmite Gloves, which let you take a -5 to hit on your spell attacks in exchange for adding a d8 of damage. Technically, you don't need to kill her in order to acquire the gloves. She has a quest line, and if you follow it, she will hand them out to you as a reward afterwards, but it's not a quest line that I'm interested in doing, and in Baldur's Gate 3, blood is much cheaper than time. Apparently not even a magically infused half-illithid flying from rooftop to rooftop, invoking eldritch powers and murdering random circus goers is enough to garner the attention of anybody not immediately affected. In a last-ditch attempt to ruin the circus, we go heckle a clown, and surprisingly enough, he doesn't take it too well. So we try to diffuse things with a joke. How many changelings does it take to kill a warlock? More than 3. With the circus ruined and a job well done, we decide to pick up a souvenir to help ourselves remember the day. I am of course talking about a life-size stone replica of ourselves. It gets a little lonely in a lone wolf runner's camp, just me and Withers staring back at one another, so I decide to spice things up. Now I can look at myself instead. Okay, that's enough clowning around. We still have a city to save. We head over to the Temple of Ilmater, and returning viewers will be pleased to hear that we've named the elephant. His name is Hoover. I bring this up because as we enter the temple, we notice somebody who might make a perfect match for our boy. We walk up in an attempt to introduce him, but she leaves before we get the chance. We're eager to chase after her, but the Rector of Ilmater stops us and asks a favor. Normally, we don't concern ourselves with the needs of random peasants, but in this case she lets us know that there's been a murder. And, you know, we can't have that. The leading theory is that the murder was committed by one of the refugees that the church has been harboring. However, I'm personally more suspicious of the 3 cannibals living in the basement. I mean, did nobody check? We waste no time in throwing them off the map and following their trail outside. We walk along the shoreline for a little bit until we come across 2 unique and unrelated criminal organizations. They're in the middle of a standoff, and each one of them offers us a sizable sum of money to take the other out. This leads us to the conclusion that both of these gangs have a lot of money on them, so we give them the authentic New Year's Eve experience. That is to say, we put them into a cold, cramped, and dark room and watch as they recklessly swing blunt objects at one another until only a few of them are still standing. We loot what we can off the remains before taking our findings to Hoover's bride-to-be, who does not seem too happy to see us.
I recognize that face.
They tell us to piss off and come back with some harder evidence, and we take half of their advice, crossing the bridge and heading into Baldur's Gate. This cop tries to deny us entry, but fortunately, just like cops in real life, all you have to do is threaten them and they'll let you do whatever you want. Our graceful navigation of the legal system earns us an audience with Lord Gortash, and he wants to offer us a deal. We locate and kill Orin, who has apparently gone rogue, reclaim her netherstone and unite it with that of Ketheric and Gortash before we head to the Elderbrain, use the 3 stones to reassert our control over it, and rule Faerun as faceless gods. An interesting proposal. We counter by kidnapping him in broad daylight and throwing him off a building. We jump down after him and pry the netherstone from his mangled corpse before making our way into the interior city. Now, the observant viewers among you may be thinking, wait a second, Liam, you only did this so you could avoid fighting Gortash and having to deal with his force immunity, and to that I say, you're absolutely right. The Emperor takes us on a nice sightseeing tour of the city, with the first stop being his old place of business, the Elfsong Tavern. Once we arrive, the cook asks us to take care of a rat problem, and one would assume he means the 4-legged rodents, but upon further investigation we notice the Gothwanker Space Force seems to have invaded the basement. With bonus psychic damage, endless hold person spam, and the ability to summon reinforcements every turn, these guys are quite a pain in the ass. Fortunately, they have one mortal weakness: doorways. By stepping in and out of the doorway every time we take an opponent down, we're able to reset the initiative order before giving them a proper chance to counterattack. Once we figure this out, the fight goes down pretty easily. Turns out, the Gith didn't just set up camp in the basement of this tavern to exacerbate the rat problem. Rather, they came down here to investigate the Emperor's old living quarters, which we are now in the middle of. He gives us a brief tour, including a photo of his ex, his favorite soup recipe, and the underground dungeon in which he used to tie up and eat people. For those of you taking courtship notes at home, immediately following this conversation would be the optimal time to take your shirt off and stare at the other person while they sleep.
They say that home is where a person can be their truest selves.
Fuck, this guy knows what he's doing. With that out of the way, we get onto the pressing matter at hand. No, not Orin. Shopping. We pick up the Cloak of the Weave from the Devil's Fee and the Birthright Hat from Sorcerous Sundries for a respective +1 to spell attack and DCs and a +2 to our charisma. While we're here, we pay a courtesy visit to the owner of the shop, Loroakan, to let him know that his plans to capture and imprison the Night Song are ill-founded. In a moment of self-loathing and disregard for personal safety that rivals Isabel, he asks us to bring her in anyway? We let her know what's going on, and all things considered, she's pretty calm about the whole thing, opting to think through her options, weigh the pros and cons, and decide what to do next based on a tactical assessment of the situation that she's in. No, I'm kidding, she tries to rip his liver out. Not one to leave our girl hanging, we charge into the fray and get the fight going in earnest. Loroakan's got a pretty scary reaction that does approximately all of your goddamn hit points every time you deal damage to him, which we solve by fastballing an earth elemental at his head and letting it take the damage for us. Here's a fun fact for all of the viewers still watching, a little Wizard 101 if you will. It's actually quite difficult to cast spells while you're being beaten to death. Loroakan didn't seem aware of that, so we let him know right around the same time the Myrmidons take down Dame Aelin. Fortunately, his pets are much weaker than he is, and we're able to take them out with just a few turns of Eldritch Blast. In predictable Aelin fashion, she gets herself back up just in time to kill-steal the final boss of the encounter. You know, if I had a nickel for every time Aelin has stood up after being dead for almost an entire fight, only to get the final hit on the boss of the encounter, I'd have 2 nickels. Which is one of the lesser known benefits to killing somebody is that you get to steal all of their shit, and Loroakan has quite the collection. Most importantly for us is the Marco Heshkir staff. Unfortunately, it's sealed behind an arcane barrier that requires a very high DC Arcana check to open. The astute among the audience will note that warlocks, specifically our warlock, are not generally very good at Arcana checks, so please observe the following visual aid to get a sense of how I got this lock open. Now decked head to toe in magical gear, it's time we started looking into those murders from before. No, not those ones. These ones. We bust into an abandoned shack with a dead body lying on the floor, and, from a note we find within, are able to discern the location of the next, 7 murders, and with detective work this easy, I'm starting to wonder what the actual police have been doing this whole time.
Another case closed, another bottle open.
Right. The first location on the list leads us to a wine tasting ceremony. Seeing as the word subtlety is written exactly nowhere in the Book of Vile Darkness, it's not really something that we get up to often. We walk right into the middle of the thing and crash it. This pisses off a group of British midgets who attempt to stab us to death. It doesn't work out for them. One of the midgets escaped, and being the hero that we are, we immediately take to the rooftops and track him down. We catch him in the middle of a Dexter Morgan-esque psycho ritual, and this prompts him to throw a vial of poison at our head. We make the saving throw and cast haste on ourselves before flying up the stairs and blasting away at him and his comrades. The steel watch even comes to our aid. I'm not too sure who's controlling them anymore since Gortash tripped. Regardless, as a team, we're able to deal with the group of murderers, and, off of Captain Midget's body, we find a note that leads us to Candle Hollow, the hiding place of one of the leaders of this Ballist cult. We head over to the place, find the hidden wardrobe inside, and speak the passphrase that was written on the bloody note we took off Captain Midget. Once inside, we're faced with 3 Death Knights guarding an underground entrance. These are some of the coolest enemies in this game. Unfortunately for them, though, they don't have any ranged attacks or methods of teleporting, so we put them in the Hunger of Hadar blender and knock them around with repelling blast until their admittedly very large HP bars eventually reach 0. With the guards dealt with, we bust open the door to the chamber and meet the actual boss, Saravok. He's one of the original Ballspawn and grandfather to Orin. There are 2 gimmicks to this fight. The first being that if you don't kill the ghostly apparitions in front of Saravok, they cast a bunch of buffs on him and he kicks your ass. The second being that if you kill the ghostly apparitions in front of Saravok, they cast a bunch of buffs on him and he kicks your ass. We decide to engage with gimmick number 1. Instead of killing the echoes, we spend our first few turns putting as much distance between us and the enemies as possible before we get to a defensible location to drop down Hunger of Hadar. Saravok, of course, with his centuries of experience as a divinely ordained killer, is much too smart to charge into such an obvious disadvantage. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, ranged attacks are important and everybody should be able to make them. No amount of dread power is going to make up for the fact that the best you can do is spit on me as long as I'm not standing right next to you. With Saravok dead and Hoover's fiancé freed from the clutches of the Ballist cult, our game crashes. But once we fire it back up, we decide to turn up the heat on Orin. We head down into the sewers to look for her, and what we find instead is a fully functional thieves guild operating 10 feet away from the main gates to the city. Turns out the bank that they own has been having a bit of trouble recently, and I know what you're thinking. A hero would probably prioritize the well-being of the entire city over the wealth of a gang of criminals living in the sewers, but being a warlock isn't cheap, so we tell them we'll check it out. Immediately upon hearing that the bank's security has recently been compromised, we fly over as quickly as possible. Once we arrive, we find the nearest staff member and belligerently threaten them in order to gain access to the vaults. Once inside, we proceed to steal everything they own.
I wrote a blog post a while ago about why I f***ing hate video games, because this is what it does. It appeals to the male fantasy.
Unfortunately for us, they were smart enough to put a passcode on the door to the main vault. Unfortunately for them, they were stupid enough to write it down and leave it unattended in the head banker's office, so we turn ourselves invisible and go get it. Once we crack the code and head on inside, we're distraught to learn that there is actually a second robbery taking place being led by somebody going by the name of the Stone Lord. Quick-witted as ever, we immediately switch sides and assist the bank's security in quelling the threat, as if anybody's going to be robbing this place, it's us. When the dust settles, the head banker is happy to be alive, but quite upset at the fact that he just lost a lot of money, and he has no idea how right he is. He asks us to reclaim it, and we oblige, with absolutely no intention of ever bringing it back to him. We track the second group of perpetrators to the sewer, where we catch them all yapping about the Absolute before getting the drop on them. The tactic they employ is a rather brilliant one. They run at us single file wielding melee weapons, and it goes about as well for them as it has for everybody else in this playthrough. That is to say, not well. Now armed with the bank's money, Loroakan's magic items, and our patron's Eldritch power, I'm fairly confident there's nothing left in the game that can stop us. Orin's gonna be a breeze, and the Elder Brain is gonna wish it was still a tadpole writhing around in some pond. In fact, I'm so confident in my words, I'm inclined to say that one could take them to the bank. Orin is our final hurdle before facing down the Elder Brain, and she's got quite the tough setup down in the Ballis Sanctuary. She has 6 Reapers of Baal, all with their own permanent sanctuary spell and the ability to turn invisible at the end of their turns, conducting a ritual to grant her 12 unstoppable charges every turn. An unstoppable charge is expended whenever Orin would take damage to reduce the total number of that damage down to 1. That is to say, we have to hit her 12 times before we can start dealing any actual damage to her, and if we fail to do so, the amount of charges she has resets at the start of every round. Our advantages can be summarized much more succinctly. She's standing next to a pit. Thankfully, she dropped her netherstone on the way down, so we pick it up and head over to confront the brain. We sail through the darkness, kill a few intellect devourers that are still dead set on defending their master before coming face to face with the main antagonist of the game. We fail all 3 preliminary checks with flying colors before nat 20ing the DC 99 domination attempt, and I'll be honest, I didn't even save scum this, I'm just better at the game than everybody else. Unfortunately, Larian is a group of haters who have been preying on our downfall since day 1, so they make us fail anyways. The Emperor pops through a portal and saves us, throwing us into the astral prism where we can take refuge while he comes up with a plan. According to him, our only hope is to have him devour Orpheus's brain and wield the stones himself in an attempt to dominate the brain once again. I'll be honest, I was a little bit suspicious when the brain-eating alien said our only chance was to allow him to eat someone's brain, but it's not like we had any other options, so we let him go through with it. With our illithid lover hopped up on brain juices, we exit the astral prism, give a rousing speech to like 2 allies, and heroically charge into the fray. When I say heroically charge into the fray, I of course mean turn ourselves and the Emperor invisible and leave everybody else for dead. Invisibility also ends up coming in clutch atop the Netherbrain, as I was really not looking forward to fighting an adult red dragon, 4 mind flayers, and a hellish nightmare all at the same time. We're able to get the Emperor safely to the Crown of Karsus and keep him invisible while he channels the spell. 1 round later and the portal is open, we rush inside and give our best impression of an M134 minigun, and Eldritch blast the brain until it dies. As we're given some time to reflect while the brain falls out of the sky, causing chaos and mayhem on the way down, I can't help but note that, while the city may now be safer in the long term, it certainly would have been more peaceful had we not been here at all. Withers throws us a party in recognition of our accomplishments and invites literally just the owlbear. I will say, if not an exciting function, it is at least a faithful representation of our journey. With that, the world's loneliest warlock can finally rest. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
And above all, problem